8 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Minister, for being here this afternoon. I'd like to thank Senator Ó Ríordáin for bringing this bill forward. I never really prepare myself for actually how upset I get at some of these conversations, and I continue to be surprised by the distance between politicians and the lived experiences of people in this country. And I don't know why I continue to be surprised, because I sometimes think that my well-meaning colleagues don't even hear the undertones of the things that they're saying when they're making the contributions. A huge amount of the contributions today were about how great boards of management were, and how great schools were, and how much we need to, realise, it's an awful lot of work to run a board of management. I can tell you now, in no uncertain terms, the conversations in the room of a board of management are not reflective of what goes on in a classroom. And just because, I'm sorry to Senator Aodhán, but just because you don't see it happening, that doesn't mean it's not happening. And you should believe us when we say that it's embarrassing to drop your child to school, and we are shamed on many occasions for not being able to pay contributions. And I have been. I have been embarrassed when my child, years ago when I was on loan parents, would come home time and time again. My teacher asked, no notes anymore, not a note in a closed envelope coming to my door, a direct quote to my child about fees. Now, I would have bought the books, bought the uniform, and I've always been used to paying for books because my parents paid for books. It was something that I knew, I factored for, I allowed for. Contribution fees came later. I'm telling you now that everything that Senator Ó Ríordáin says is true. It is true. And the problem is, because it doesn't affect people like us and even me now, we fail to see that it's happening, because we listen to the well-meaning conversations of board of managements around the table, and it's not the reality. It's not what's happening. I don't care about how a school feels about keeping on the lights if it's going to be to the detriment of a family who can't keep on their lights. We do not place the burden of that on any family. We cannot guilt and shame a family that if they don't pay a voluntary contribution, that their school will not be able to buy art supplies. Why should any parent that is living on €180 to €250 a week, paying colossal rent, trying to feed a number of children, clothe a number of children, why should they be the one that has to pay to keep the school lights on? It's such a manipulative way to get money out of people, It's manipulation, it's abuse, it's actual abuse. To say to parents, we won't be able to do this particular thing now in the school if you don't pay the student contribution fee. That is abusing a parent and their lack of ability to be able to contribute. Because the embarrassment that brings, and you do not show up for parent-teacher meetings, and there's schools that won't give your child a locker until you've paid a student contribution fee. My own daughter had to go to school with big, massive books until I had a locker fee when she started secondary school. She had to walk up in the morning with a big, heavy bag of books, back down at lunchtime. It is happening. And I was least affected by it than a lot of people, because I didn't have to run my own home. I was very lucky to still live with my parents, and they supported me. But I watched, and it's happening all around the country, particularly in Dublin. And I can't account for outside Dublin, because I don't have experience of working with the parents there. So I will account for Dublin and say it is happening. And teachers are saying to students, you will not do this activity if you don't have... That was supposed to be paid 3 months ago. They're saying this directly to children. Poverty shaming children in front of their classmates, making the rest of the class aware that this child hasn't paid a particular thing. And now when we buy books, we don't even get to reuse them, because the department decided, or whoever it was that decided, was we use workbooks now, where you write, you do your work on the book, in the pages. So we can't even hand the books down. So parents used to have an option where at least if they bought the books once, they ripple down through the family. That doesn't happen now. I had one teacher make a child, the parent, the grandmother had the children, had care of the children. I'm not sure what happened to the child's mother. And the parent did what they used to do in the 80s, and they wrapped the school books with wallpaper. Because that's what they did. The leftover wallpaper, wrapped them for a cover. The school took it off and said it didn't look neat and told her she was to go out and buy brown sheets or something to cover them. And this is happening every day in classrooms, and I'm only scratching the surface because I'll only ever have so much of the information. But what I'm saying is we can't continue to have these conversations and talk about how great boards of management are. We can't. We know that. We know they're doing the work. But you know what? They'll go home to their own lives. They won't be the child that goes home feeling absolutely ashamed of themselves because they think they're poor now. And as a mother, I'd lie my way through anything when I didn't have enough money to pay for something. Or I'm just waiting for this payment, for explaining myself, justifying myself. I've watched my friends do it. And we don't even tell each other we can't afford it. Why? Because we're embarrassed. So we say, oh no, James, I just forgot to drop it up next week. And that's literally what we're doing. We can't even admit it to ourselves and to other people that we can't afford it because we feel ashamed and we feel like there's something wrong with us that we can't pay a particular fee for a child. It's happening all over every school. And children are being shamed. And I just think we need to shift the conversation. If we think boards of management are great and teachers are great, let's support them in receiving the adequate state funding. Don't keep telling us we have to demand voluntary contributions and place the burden on families that are already feeling embarrassed and shamed enough without having to tell their child that they can't afford something that they need. It's completely unethical. It's immoral in my view. It's completely immoral. So if we want to put our efforts in here to something, it's about advocating for education. It's about advocating that the state adequately pays for education, not trying to make the case that there's nothing else we can do and we have to look for voluntary contributions. Because until you've walked a day in any of those families' shoes, what you say here is completely irrelevant. When you talk about teachers and their well-meaningness, it's completely irrelevant to me. Because when you've actually faced that and you've watched your community face it and you've watched families with 5, 6, 7 kids try to pay their way through school, and you know what it does? We already have a situation where often in communities where there's high deprivation and poverty, we already have a negative experience of education. The last thing you need to do is further compound that and reinforce that by creating a negative situation between you and your classmates because you can't afford something or you and your teacher. That should be an equal relationship of where people can flourish. And it's like what Aodhán said, what it creates when you bring the money factor in. You create a transactional relationship between you and your school and you and your teacher, and it becomes less about learning and it becomes more about demanding money, and it becomes a service like every other authoritative service that we already have negative interactions with in many working class communities. And we need to remove that so that we can actually get to the true nature of education. And we, as politicians, need to trust families when they say that this is their experience, whether we sit on boards of management or not. Whether we sit on boards of management, because it's not. You can sit in a boardroom and you can be really inspired by the people around you and say, aren't they great? They're telling me they're doing all these things. But you're not sitting in those family homes listening to their stories and their experiences of interaction with the schools. And the problem is we are starving schools of resources, and it's nearly like we're creating this situation between them and parents and them and families instead of supporting schools to receive the adequate funding so that they can have a real educational, transformative educational relationship with the people that they work with. So I refrain from getting really annoyed, but I just would ask people to watch when they're speaking, that just because they don't see something doesn't mean it's not happening, and just to open your eyes a bit more and actually engage with family members that actually experience this stuff.
Okay, thanks, Senator. Since no one else offering